When you walk into an exchange appointment, the first impression you create sets the entire tone of the interaction. The professional sitting across from you, whether they are a banker, an exchange officer, or a financial representative, is silently evaluating you from the very beginning. They are not only listening to the words you say, but also observing the way you carry yourself, the confidence in your voice, and the clarity of your questions. This is why admitting ignorance in any form, saying things like, "I don't really understand this process," or "I'm not sure what's going on here," can have far-reaching consequences that go beyond just words. In that moment, you unintentionally communicate vulnerability, and vulnerability in financial transactions often translates into missed opportunities, unfavorable terms, or even being taken advantage of. Now, it is important to understand that no one expects you to be a financial expert or to possess the knowledge of a seasoned currency trader. What is expected of you, however, is to display a baseline understanding of what you are doing and why you are there. The difference between being prepared and unprepared is not about mastering complex banking jargon. It is about being able to carry yourself with authority. Imagine the difference between two individuals. One says, "I know this is a significant exchange and I would like to review the details carefully," while the other blurts out, "I don't really know how this works, so just guide me." The first individual is respected, while the second is flagged as dependent, passive, and potentially easy to manipulate. When you admit ignorance, even if your intent is to show honesty or humility, the effect is often damaging. The professional may interpret your words as an open invitation to limit their explanations, speed through important details, or even avoid disclosing certain options you could have asked about. In a world where clarity and precision are essential, projecting confusion creates the impression that you are not ready to take full responsibility for the choices you are about to make. And let us not forget, this is your money, your future, and possibly the biggest financial event of your life. To admit ignorance is, in a sense, to hand over the steering wheel at the exact moment you need to be firmly in control. There is also a psychological aspect at play. People tend to respond differently depending on whether they perceive you as an equal partner or as a dependent participant. If you present yourself as someone who lacks understanding, the power dynamic shifts in the other person's favor, whether consciously or unconsciously. They may feel no obligation to walk you through all the details thoroughly, assuming you would not fully grasp them anyway. Conversely, when you present yourself as informed, curious, and capable, they are more likely to approach you with respect, offering the clarity and cooperation you need. This does not mean you should pretend to know everything, but it does mean you should never openly confess a lack of understanding in a way that undermines your position. Preparation is your best defense against ever needing to say you don't understand. That preparation begins before you even schedule the appointment. You must research the basics, what the exchange rate currently looks like, what typical fees could be involved, what documentation is generally required, and what types of questions people in your position should be asking. With this knowledge in hand, you do not have to worry about being caught off guard. If something is unfamiliar, you can still seek clarification, but you will do so from a position of informed inquiry rather than confused dependency. For instance, instead of saying, "I don't understand the rate," you can say, "Can you explain how this rate is being calculated compared to the market standard?" The first phrase shows ignorance, while the second shows awareness and initiative. Another reason you must avoid admitting ignorance is because of the ripple effect it has on your mindset. When you say aloud that you don't understand, you reinforce to yourself that you are out of your depth. That admission doesn't just impact how others see you, it begins to shape how you see yourself in that moment. You begin to believe you are not equipped for the task, which can lead to hesitation, rushed decisions, or blind acceptance of terms you should have questioned. In contrast, when you choose to present yourself with calm confidence, even if you are uncertain about certain details, you reinforce within yourself the belief that you are capable, alert, and in control. This self-perception strengthens your ability to make wise decisions under pressure. Let's consider a scenario. Imagine you sit down at your appointment and the exchange officer outlines a rate and fee structure. If you admit ignorance, you might say, "I don't really get this, just tell me what I'm getting." That one sentence sets you up for disappointment. The officer has no reason to go further or explain alternative options because you have already indicated that you are not interested in or capable of understanding the details. But if you avoid admitting ignorance, you can instead say, "Can you show me the breakdown of how this rate applies to my currency amount?" Now you have placed yourself in a stronger position. You are asking for transparency, showing that you expect to see the numbers, and establishing that you value clarity. The difference between these two approaches is profound, and it all comes down to the choice of words. It is also worth mentioning that not admitting ignorance does not mean being arrogant or confrontational. The goal is not to pretend you are an expert, but to demonstrate that you are informed enough to engage intelligently. The right approach balances humility with confidence. If you encounter something unfamiliar, you can phrase your questions in a way that signals curiosity without weakness. For example, you might say, "I'm familiar with the general exchange process, but I'd like more detail on how this specific step works." That statement acknowledges a limit without undermining your authority. It positions you as someone who is engaged, not as someone who is lost. In essence, every word you speak at your exchange appointment is a reflection of your readiness. Admitting ignorance exposes you to risks that can easily be avoided with preparation, thoughtful phrasing, and the right mindset. The professional on the other side of the table is trained to pick up on cues, both spoken and unspoken. When you project knowledge, you are treated with professionalism. When you project confusion, you invite control by others. The choice is yours every time you open your mouth and every time you decide what words to use or avoid in that critical moment. When you sit across the table at an exchange appointment, one of the most critical aspects of protecting yourself is the posture you hold regarding the rate you are offered. Too many people make the fatal mistake of walking into the room, hearing a figure, and responding with words like, "I'll take whatever rate you can give me." This single statement may seem harmless, but it communicates to the other party that you have no intention of negotiating, no awareness of your own leverage, and no ability to question what is placed in front of you. Once you surrender your position in that way, you essentially remove yourself from the role of decision maker and place complete control in the hands of the institution. The exchange process is not simply a matter of numbers. It is also a matter of psychology. Every transaction involves negotiation, whether it is spoken or unspoken. When you express that you will accept whatever is being offered, you are signaling that you are not there to secure the best outcome, but merely to take whatever scraps are placed before you. Professionals who handle exchanges every day are adept at reading these cues. If they sense that you are not going to challenge or inquire further, they will have no reason to provide you with the best possible term. Even if the institution has a standard rate, there may be adjustments, incentives, or structures that only come to light if the client shows awareness and composure. It is important to realize that rates are not always static. Yes, there may be base rates or published figures, but the details, such as service fees, transaction costs, time-based adjustments, and account options can vary. If you have done your research, you know what the market is reflecting, you know what range is realistic, and you walk in with that information in your back pocket. This knowledge gives you a quiet but powerful advantage. You do not need to shout or argue, but by asking precise questions and refusing to appear complacent, you keep yourself in the seat of authority. Consider how damaging the word whatever can be. It implies a lack of seriousness, a lack of preparation, and most dangerously, a lack of value for your own assets. If you walk into an appointment after years of waiting for the opportunity to exchange your currency, why would you reduce that moment to a shrug of the shoulders? Saying "whatever you give me" communicates that you do not know the worth of what you hold. When you do not know your own worth, the person across from you has no incentive to honor it. Instead, they will take the path of least resistance, which is to give you the minimum acceptable offer. There is also an emotional component to surrendering leverage. People often feel overwhelmed or nervous in formal financial settings. The language is unfamiliar, the environment is intimidating, and the authority of the person across the desk can make you second-guess yourself. Out of nervousness, some clients rush to accept whatever is placed in front of them just to get through the process quickly, but that impulse can cost you greatly. This is why mental preparation is as important as financial preparation. Walking in calm, steady, and deliberate allows you to resist the temptation to give away your leverage for the sake of comfort. One effective strategy is to reframe how you respond to offers. Instead of saying "whatever you can give me," you can say, "Can you confirm how this rate compares to the current market standard?" This phrasing signals that you are aware of the existence of benchmarks and that you expect transparency. Another option is, "Could you outline all fees or deductions associated with this rate so I have a clear picture of what I will receive?" These types of statements are simple, respectful, and professional, but they prevent you from appearing passive. They also force the professional to justify their figures, which is a subtle but powerful way of maintaining balance in the interaction. Remember that leverage is not only about numbers, it is also about presence. If you appear nervous, rushed, or desperate, you weaken your position even if you never say whatever. Conversely, if you are patient, attentive, and calm, you demonstrate that you are not going to be rushed into an unfavorable agreement. Sometimes simply pausing after an offer and taking your time to think communicates more strength than any words. The silence itself shows that you are evaluating, calculating, and deciding rather than blindly accepting. Another layer to consider is that financial institutions respect informed clients. When you decline to surrender leverage, you do not come across as difficult or troublesome. You come across as professional. Banks and exchange officers are trained to handle confident, prepared individuals. In fact, many prefer working with clients who ask intelligent questions because it minimizes misunderstandings later. By refusing to give away your leverage, you position yourself as someone who deserves respect, and respect often translates into better service and clearer terms. There is also a broader principle at stake here. When you practice holding leverage in this setting, you are building a habit that will carry into every financial decision you make afterward. If you learn to protect your interests during the exchange, you will be better prepared to protect them when opening new accounts, making investments, or negotiating contracts. The discipline of never surrendering leverage is not only about this single appointment, it is about shaping a mindset of financial empowerment that can serve you for years to come. Think of it this way. Your words frame the entire interaction. Saying, "I'll take whatever," tells the story of someone who walked into the room without confidence. Saying, "Can you clarify how this rate is applied?" tells the story of someone who came prepared, who values their resources, and who expects fairness. The difference between these two individuals is not in their background or education, but in their choice of words and the posture they hold during the appointment. When you remind yourself of this principle, you realize that surrendering leverage is entirely avoidable. It is not about being aggressive or demanding. It is about refusing to undermine yourself with careless words. It is about holding your ground calmly and respectfully in a way that communicates both intelligence and self-respect. When people approach a financial exchange, particularly one as unique as the Iraqi Dinar process, there is often a temptation to repeat things they have heard online or in conversations with others. Statements like, "I heard this will make me rich overnight," or "Someone told me I could walk out of here a millionaire today," might feel like casual comments, but they are among the most dangerous phrases you could ever bring into a professional setting. Words that project unrealistic expectations immediately frame you as someone who is not grounded in financial reality. The professional on the other side of the desk does not hear enthusiasm in such statements. What they hear is naivety, and naivety can be costly. When you make comments that sound speculative or exaggerated, you create a picture of yourself as someone who has not done serious preparation. Financial institutions and exchange officers operate in a world of facts, policies, and documented procedures. They are not moved by rumors or online chatter, nor do they take kindly to clients who enter an appointment expecting magic to happen. When you say something that sounds like a rumor, you are effectively admitting that your foundation is shaky. You reveal that your perspective has been shaped more by hearsay than by legitimate research, and in doing so, you weaken your credibility before the process has even begun. Credibility is everything in a financial exchange. When you are credible, you are treated as an informed, rational client who deserves professionalism and respect. When you lose credibility, you risk being dismissed as someone who does not deserve the full explanation of terms. Worse still, you may invite tighter restrictions or extra scrutiny because the institution may see you as a liability rather than a partner. This is why it is so critical to avoid speaking in a way that makes you sound naive. Even if you feel excitement, even if you believe great things are about to happen, keep your words grounded, professional, and based in reality. Part of the problem with repeating online narratives is that they are often fueled by exaggeration. People love to share stories of overnight wealth, secret rates, or special insider deals. These stories spread because they play to people's emotions, but they are rarely anchored in verifiable fact. Walking into your appointment with those stories on your lips shows that you have been swayed by fantasy rather than equipped with knowledge. This does not mean you cannot be hopeful about the outcome, but it does mean you must discipline your language so that your hope does not sound like gullibility. Imagine the difference between two clients. The first says, "I heard from a friend this is going to change my life instantly." The second says, "I am here to understand the exact rate being applied and any associated requirements." Both may have the same private expectations, but only one is taken seriously. The other is quietly placed in a category of clients who do not truly grasp the nature of the process. This classification matters because professionals who sense naivety are more likely to breeze through explanations, avoid giving detailed answers, or even structure the interaction in a way that benefits the institution more than the client. Naivety is not only expressed through words of exaggerated expectation, it can also come across in tone and body language. Nervous laughter, casual remarks about becoming rich, or comparing the appointment to winning the lottery all add to the impression that you are not treating the process with the seriousness it deserves. To avoid this, focus on presenting yourself as calm, measured, and businesslike. Every word should reflect that you see this as a professional transaction, not as a fantasy coming true. The person across the desk is not there to celebrate your dreams. They are there to complete a financial procedure. Speak in a way that aligns with that reality. A good rule to follow is this: never bring unverified information into the conversation. If you read something online or heard it from someone else, it has no place in the room unless it comes from an official, documented source. Professionals respect precision. Instead of saying, "I heard there is a special rate for people like me," you could ask, "Are there any programs or account options available with this transaction?" The first phrase makes you sound uninformed. The second makes you sound inquisitive and professional. This small shift in language transforms how you are perceived and how much respect you receive in return. It is also worth considering that sounding naive can affect not just how the other person views you, but how you view yourself. When you speak words of exaggeration, you place yourself in an emotional state that is not conducive to rational decision making. You begin to expect unrealistic outcomes, and when those outcomes are not delivered, you may make rash choices out of disappointment. Grounded language, on the other hand, reinforces a grounded mindset. By keeping your words factual, you help yourself stay calm, alert, and capable of evaluating what is really happening in the moment. Another danger of sounding naive is that it may lead to others controlling the narrative for you. If you walk in talking about overnight riches, the institution may seize on your inexperience and frame the conversation in a way that steers you quickly toward terms that benefit them. They may not feel compelled to offer alternatives or explain nuances because you have already signaled that you are satisfied with a simplistic fantasy. In contrast, if you demonstrate seriousness, you create an environment where details matter, transparency is expected, and your role as a decision maker is clear. This is why the discipline of your words is so critical. Discipline does not mean you must suppress your excitement entirely. It means you channel it into thoughtful, professional questions that open doors rather than close them. Instead of saying, "I heard I'd be wealthy instantly," you can say, "Can you walk me through the timeline of when funds become available after the exchange?" This type of question acknowledges your anticipation but frames it in a way that is practical and responsible. In the end, sounding naive is a mistake that can be avoided through preparation, self-awareness, and intentional communication. By focusing only on verifiable facts, by speaking with composure, and by avoiding exaggerated claims, you ensure that your words reflect seriousness rather than speculation. This choice preserves your credibility, strengthens your position, and increases the likelihood that the process unfolds in a way that truly serves your best interests. When you enter an exchange appointment, one of the most revealing things you can say is a statement that communicates urgency. Words like, "I need this money immediately," or "I can't wait, I need access right now," might sound like simple expressions of your situation, but in that setting, they do more harm than good. Financial professionals are trained to notice signals of desperation, and once they detect urgency in your voice, their perception of you changes instantly. Instead of seeing you as a composed client who can evaluate options and make informed choices, they begin to see you as someone who will accept whatever is put in front of them simply because time pressure is overriding judgment. This shift in perception is dangerous because desperation rarely attracts favorable terms. Urgency often translates into vulnerability. When you admit that you need something right away, you hand over your negotiating power before the conversation even begins. Imagine two clients walking in on the same day. The first says, "I'm here to understand the full process and review the details carefully." The second says, "I need this money today as fast as possible." The professional knows instantly which client has more leverage. The one who is willing to wait, to ask questions, and to evaluate patiently is the one who cannot easily be pushed. The one who is anxious and rushing has already revealed they will take less if it means walking away faster. This is why words of urgency are words you must never use. There is also a psychological dimension to urgency. When you hear yourself say out loud that you need something immediately, you reinforce to your own mind that you are not in control. That feeling of lack of control can shape your behavior throughout the appointment. You may rush through reading documents, overlook fees, or sign agreements you do not fully understand just to resolve your situation quickly. In contrast, when you discipline yourself to remain calm and steady, Even if you feel pressure inside, you create a mental environment where you can think clearly and make rational decisions. Your internal state affects your external outcomes, and language is one of the strongest tools for shaping that state. Another issue with expressing desperation is that it narrows the scope of possibilities available to you. Financial transactions often involve multiple options, different accounts, payout timelines, or structures that could be tailored to your benefit. But when you say you need money instantly, you may be locked into the fastest but least favorable option. Institutions know that people in a hurry will not explore alternatives, and so they may not even bother offering them. By presenting yourself as patient and composed, you keep the door open to explore all possibilities, including those that may ultimately serve you better. It is also important to recognize that urgency can be misinterpreted. The professional on the other side may not see your statement as a simple reflection of your personal needs. They may interpret it as recklessness. If you are viewed as reckless, it could trigger additional scrutiny, stricter oversight, or even hesitation in finalizing the transaction. Institutions have obligations to prevent fraud, money laundering, or unstable behavior, and when someone appears too eager, they may be flagged as a potential risk. By avoiding statements of desperation, you protect yourself from unnecessary suspicion or delays. Think about how subtle differences in phrasing can change everything. If you say, "I need this today, I can't wait," you have cornered yourself. But if you say, "Can you explain the timeline for access to funds so I can plan accordingly?" you gather the same information without exposing yourself. The second version frames you as organized and forward-thinking rather than rushed and vulnerable. Both questions stem from the same concern, but one weakens your position while the other strengthens it. The difference lies in the discipline of your language. Patience is not only a virtue, it is a strategy. Financial institutions respect clients who demonstrate composure. When you project patience, you communicate that you cannot be easily pressured, that patience is not about slowing down the process unnecessarily, but about signaling that you are in control of your decisions. It is about establishing that your choices will be made thoughtfully, not out of desperation. Professionals respect that demeanor because it mirrors the qualities they value in serious clients: clarity, focus, and responsibility. There's also a long-term benefit to mastering your expression of urgency. The exchange appointment is just one step in a broader financial journey. Once you receive funds, you will be faced with new decisions about managing, investing, or protecting your resources. If you establish a habit of showing desperation in this first step, you may carry that pattern into future interactions with advisors, bankers, or partners. Each time you reveal urgency, you weaken your leverage. But if you discipline yourself here, you set the tone for every future transaction. You become the kind of client who is seen as steady, informed, and unshakable. Another reason to avoid words of urgency is that they can cause you to overlook hidden traps. Many financial agreements contain details that only become clear when reviewed carefully: fine print conditions, timelines, and obligations. A desperate client rushes past these, eager to get immediate access to funds. A composed client, on the other hand, takes the time to read, ask, and clarify. That small difference can mean the avoidance of costly mistakes or commitments that could have long-term consequences. Protecting yourself begins with giving yourself the time and space to think, and that begins with refusing to frame yourself as someone who needs everything right now. There may be times when you genuinely do need quick access, but even then, how you communicate that need matters. Instead of confessing desperation, you can ask structured questions. You could say, "What are the available options for expedited access, and how do they differ from standard timelines?" This way, you communicate urgency in the form of inquiry rather than vulnerability. The professional hears you asking for information rather than begging for help, and that distinction preserves your position. Your words are always shaping the energy of the room. A desperate tone creates imbalance. A calm tone creates equality. The person across the desk is influenced not only by the policies they follow, but by the impression you create. If you sound desperate, they subconsciously expect you to be less discerning. If you sound composed, they approach you with more caution and respect. The way you carry yourself and the way you phrase your questions directly affects the seriousness with which you are treated. For these reasons, discipline over urgency is non-negotiable. You may feel anxious inside, but you must never allow that anxiety to slip into your words. Once urgency is spoken, it becomes visible, and once it is visible, it shapes the outcome. By guarding your language carefully, by presenting yourself as calm and deliberate, you protect both your leverage and your future.